Hello. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, let's see if I can remember how to use PowerPoint. There we go. That's my name. I'm Paul. I'm an art director at Access Studios. Thank you very much for coming to watch my talk. So in this talk, we're going to be talking about who Access are, who are Access, what are Access. I couldn't think of a good way to write that, but we're going to talk a little bit about Access, the studio. I'm going to talk a wee bit about myself and how I ended up working for the company, kind of a little bit about my story. What even is art direction? It's one of those kind of terms that if you're working in the industry or new to the industry, you might not even know what it means or what it means specifically for what we do, which is art direction for animation and for cinematics. What actually is my job is my note there. Breakdown of a recent project. That didn't need a question mark, but I'm going to run you through an example of a project that we did fairly recently that I art directed, kind of to give you a feel for how we work. We don't often show the stuff that we actually produce for that kind of work. So I wanted to give you a chance to actually see, hey, this is actually what the process looks like for those who haven't. And we got permission to use that. There is a caveat here. You guys will not be able to film anything beyond a certain point, but I'll call that out when it comes up. Basically, we've got some NDA stuff that we can't talk about. And then overview, still using the question marks, an overview of lessons and tips that I've learned along the way. A lot of this talk is about what art direction is, but also, if you find yourself thinking in this way or working in this way, maybe this works for you. So it's going to be kind of a roundup of like stuff I've learned that might be valuable if you want to become an art director too. And then if we have time, we'll do some questions. This is a pretty short talk. I think I only have 45 minutes. And I have no idea how long this talk will take because I never time these things out. So if we have time at the end, we can do some questions. I'm going to try and err on the side of making it shorter so that there's more time for questions, which means I'm not going to go into super crazy detail with everything in the talk. So if you think of something as I'm talking, just write it down and ask me at the end if you have time. And if I don't have time, just come and grab me and we'll talk about it. So who are Access? I'm actually going to just show you the real, because it'll give you kind of a good feel for the kind of work that we do. So I will now click a button, and that will happen. Let's make it really obnoxiously loud. When miracles are known to happen, we're burning up the oxygen, coming up for air. It's about to happen. What can be said? Why speak? Why try the tone? What's done is done.
about to happen.
All right, so I made all of that myself. Thank you, thanks. Yeah, it was a lot of work, but it was worth it. That's kind of an overview of the kind of projects that we work on. A lot of stuff in the video games side, also film and TV. We do VFX, we do other stuff that you just saw. Work for big games like all of the games you just saw. I can't think. I'm doing a talk. So I was going to do a whole part about who we are, which would give you a feel for the breakdown of the studios. But there's actually a video that Access did that covers that. So basically, any excuse for me to show a video instead of talking to you about a thing, I'm going to take that. So I'm going to show you a little thing about Access. It talks a bit about the culture. It talks a bit about the different studios that we have, for there are 3. And it'll give you a little bit of overview. It's kind of like an adorable, cheesy recruitment video that you can enjoy. And then we'll talk a bit more about it afterwards. So, more videos. That's the same video, Paul. There you go. Look at that face.
What I find unique about Axis is the fact that we are from so many different places of the world. We still behave as a family, we still communicate as a family.
I'm Scottish born and bred, but I love going out and get to meet all these new people coming in from all parts of the world, which is wonderful.
Axis Animation is based in Glasgow. We have a VFX company down in Bristol, and we have a production studio in London. What we're doing here at Axis is an enormous slate of very diverse projects, which is incredibly challenging. It's a very exciting time to be here.
Each project is something different, something exciting. It's like doing anything from an interior of a spaceship to going back in time to some ancient civilizations.
What's exciting at the moment is we are growing quite a lot. So you as an artist can also grow together with the company.
The 4 founding members of the company are here working every day. 2 are directors, and the importance and the value placed on the creative side of the business is what I think keeps the passion within the studio for everyone that works here.
If I love Glasgow, how can't you love Glasgow?
It's an amazing city, Glasgow.
It's got great culture, it's got great music.
People are lovely, very approachable and friendly, so yeah, it's a great place to live.
Oh, Bristol is gorgeous. It's my favorite place ever. So fresh and arty and inspiring.
I love London. I've been here 15 years now and I'm not leaving, so.
It's just a good melting pot to be immersed in and just grow as an artist.
There's a great energy here. People sharing ideas, people helping each other all the time.
You get all these cultures and you see everyone coming together and people always open to each other.
Go out together for a drink and we have screenings at the end of every month where we just sit and we watch the work we're producing and really enjoy what each other are working on, which is great.
So that was adorable. I wasn't in that video, probably because I'm way too awkward on camera. But there were some sort of key things there that were covered, which is it's 3 studios, and I probably have a slide. Don't play it again, Paul. 3 studios. We produce, animated films for a huge variety of projects. Again, like I said before, from video games to full-on TV series, and doing VFX for all sorts of things. One thing that is really cool about Axis, and one of the reasons I got interested in it, and we'll go back to this, is that projects tend to be really short. A lot of them are like 3 to 6 months long, which if you're a concept artist or someone who likes to work on short-form kind of snappy projects across different art styles, it's like a perfect place for that, honestly. It's wonderful. It's kind of nuts being able to like work on Elder Scrolls for 3 months and then Destiny 2 for like 4 months after. Like you never get that experience in other studios. It's pretty cool. And yeah, there's tons of scope to kind of do your thing and to push your personality into the work, which I love. And the people are pretty nice, I gotta say. I'm there, and it's very diverse, which is pretty rare, especially if you work in the games industry. It's a much more diverse company than most game studios, which is awesome. So I'm going to talk about my journey for a wee bit because they asked me to do this talk. So I'm going to talk about how I kind of got to Axis. I'm not going to go into crazy detail on this part because This talk isn't all about me, but I do need to cover at least like a little bit, because what I hope to achieve here is for you guys to see maybe some parallels with your thought processes and how you guys think, and why maybe you guys would be good fits for art direction. Because honestly, I think more people should be thinking, everyone wants to be a concept artist, everyone wants to be an illustrator, but being an art director is pretty cool as well, and you can do all of that stuff. So anyway, I'm already talking way too much. So I have worked as a professional artist now for 12 years. My clients include Wizards of the Coast. I work on Magic the Gathering. I've worked for Valve, Riot Games, and a bunch of other ones. But to go right back to the start, my journey started when I was a small baby. I was a massive video game person, and I was completely obsessed with video game cinematics in particular. Mostly because games at the time looked terrible, but the cinematics were like evocative and beautiful and just amazing. And I was completely obsessed with games like Diablo 2, which is here, Dungeon Keeper, Warcraft, all that kind of stuff. I was really obsessed with pre-rendered video. I didn't know how anything was made at the time, but I loved them, and I used to copy the art all the time and do all that sort of stuff. I was really lucky to go to a school when I was a kid that had a really good, like, kind of fine art program, and I got really into sculpture and oil painting, and I could never really be sat on one thing. Like, I wasn't the best drawer. Yeah, sure. I wasn't the best drawer, I wasn't the best sculptor, I wasn't the best oil painter, but I did everything because I really liked writing and doing everything else. So when I finished school, graduated school, whatever the term is, I decided to go and become an animator. Not knowing anything about animation at all, it just seemed different. And this is kind of a talking point I'm going to come back to a few times in this little segment. I've always been the kind of person who likes to try new stuff, who tries to do stuff that I don't understand, because I want to be kind of good at everything. I don't know what that says about me, but that's just how I am. And I know a lot of people think kind of the same way. They don't want to specialize, they want to be good at a whole bunch of stuff, and that was very much me. So animation, I specialized in 2D hand-drawn animation. And it was totally different. Like, it wasn't like anything I'd ever done, and I learned about direction and editing and all sorts of other skills that turned out to be super useful. I didn't really know what I was doing, though. I didn't have any plans for my career or anything like that until Christmas 2015, when my mum got me the Half-Life 2 art book, and I realized that concept art was, in fact, a real job that people did, and that I should probably do that, because it seemed really cool. I loved the idea that someone designed every tiny thing in a video game or a movie. Like, the idea that, like, oh, someone actually designed the city and designed all the props and designed those posters. That was really cool. And it's one of those things that maybe people now are more aware of, but at least at the time when we were on conceptart.org and DeviantArt, and that was kind of it, that stuff wasn't as accessible. So yeah, I jumped into learning about that. I graduated in 2007. I got my first freelance work then as a concept artist on this film and some other films. I didn't really know what I was doing, to be honest, but I was kind of learning constantly and just trying new stuff out, which is a huge part of my career. So I worked on tons of game projects over the years at that point. Again, just constantly trying to learn new stuff. Like, I remember being hugely inspired by the work on the Prince of Persia game that came out in 2007, I think it was. And just tons of other games. Anything that was exciting, I would try and copy the art style and try and learn from it. And then 3 years later, after graduating, I got my first in-house job. My friend Ben Andrews, who's now senior, I think, at CD Projekt, he recommended me for a job doing adaptations of classical literature and turning them into point-and-click adventures, basically, which is something I'd never done before. So that's what this looked like. So I had to learn about photo bashing and all these other techniques that I'm sure everyone's just like, wow, that's not interesting at all, Paul. We all do that stuff. But at the time, it was really interesting because I didn't know anything about it. And I got to, for the first time, work on a big, there was like 5 of us, a big project. And I got to push the visuals myself and ultimately got to start working with a team who I got to lead and tell them what to do, which I really enjoyed. I really liked telling people what to do. And at some point in this process, I realized that I could justifiably call myself an art director. Even though I was working on small projects with like 2 people under me, I was like, well, I'm the art director now. And for some reason, they agreed, and I got that name on my credits. So that's how I became an art director. I just said it one day, and no one said no. And I guess it stuck. In 2012, I took a sip of water. I started working at Blazing Griffin, which at the time was a tiny, tiny indie studio in Edinburgh. I think there were just 4 people when I joined it. This is like the most exciting time in my career because I was still learning and I was trying new stuff all the time, but we were starting to get work on small projects that were diverse and different. Like we did a terrible mobile game of APB, and luckily because I was at this point like the ultimate generalist, which is to say I was doing concept art and textures, and I was doing crap modeling and UI design and all sorts of stuff. I ended up being the person who was the lead artist or the art director. We didn't really have a name for it. And I got to work on all these games and do everything. I did all the character designs. This isn't like a show-off thing, by the way. This is just to say that like being a generalist is actually really empowering, actually quite cool. And yeah, I did all, and across different styles, which I loved. I loved going from like a really gritty, hardcore kind of shooty game over to an adorable dinosaur game. And the turnarounds were really short, and I loved this. This is all from like, I don't even know when this is, 2012 maybe, a while ago now. But yeah, it was really cool. And again, yeah, we worked on tons of different projects. I don't want to waste too much time going through this stuff. I think I worked on like 20 projects when I worked there, and I was the sole artist on pretty much all of it, which was really cool. You can see like designing ship designs. I was learning about like silhouette designs, and this whole time I was training myself and learning from experienced artists, ripping off Jamie Jones left, right, and center. I started learning how to kit bash in 3D, and I'm still terrible at it, but I started learning that stuff, and then taking my concepts into Unity and actually like how do we build, because I wanted to basically create Homeworld but like all in 2D with sprites. That was my goal, and as you can see it doesn't really look anything like Homeworld, but it was quite cool, and we ended up getting a BAFTA for it, so that was cool. That's the face of someone who worked crazy hard on everything and learned a ton of stuff and wasn't amazing, but again that generalist spirit of like trying everything really paid off. You know, we created something that was really coherent and exciting, and I really enjoyed being an art director. That was cool. So in 2000 and something, I worked on the last project that I worked on at Blazing Griffin, and I want to call this one up because for this project, it was a much bigger budget than I was used to, and I specifically asked not to be the art director on this one. I wasn't super confident about whether I'd be able to do it, and I didn't have the technical know-how, and I really wanted to see if we could bring someone in who would fill in the technical side of things and like oversee all of that. So we brought on Sim Furness, who was one of the original artists on Tomb Raider. He even worked on Desert Strike, if any of you guys know that game. And that was really interesting, and I think that the note I kind of want to make here is that I was constantly hungry for knowledge. I still am, always trying to learn new stuff, but I think there's something to say for being humble and like wanting to learn from other people, because that's how any of us, no matter whether you want to be an art director or a concept artist or whatever, I think it's valuable to really want to learn from other people. I didn't know anything about 3D pipeline really, so I learned tons of stuff from this guy. So yeah, I did all the concepts for this game. Again, don't want to dwell on any of this stuff. Did a whole thing for Legacy of Kain. That was very cool. And then of course, as with all Legacy of Kain games, it vanished. Necromunda, all sorts of things. So anyway, the whole point here is I worked on a ton of projects across all sorts of styles, and I really loved the kind of short projects with different variety. And that takes me to Axis. So in 2017, my Axis journey began. A friend of mine mentioned that they were hiring, and I went and spoke to John Beeston, who's over there. Most beautiful man on earth, incredible beard. I spoke to John, and he told me about the job, basically. And the way he told it was essentially, hey, you get to work on loads of stuff, tons of different art styles, it changes all the time. And I was like, oh, yeah, obviously that's what I want to do. So that's my sort of weird career up to that point. That didn't take too long, right? It did take too long. Okay. So let's actually get to talking about art direction now that you know the stuff I've done and a little bit about the studio. So art direction at Axis, important note there, different companies have different ways of working. The overall job that we have is to work with a director to define the look of the film. Okay, it's fairly simple. We do a lot of the concept art, or we bring on concept artists to kind of figure out the style of the film. We often will do the color scripts ourselves, which like tell the flow of how the film will look through color alone. And we work with look dev artists and so on to establish the workflow. One thing you'll have definitely noticed, hopefully, in the reel that I showed is that we do 3D work, we do 2D work, we do 3D, 2D work. There's tons of crossover here and there. And again, loads of different styles. So every single project is like a whole new, how the heck do we actually produce this thing? Like if you're working on like we did a thing for Guild Wars years ago. It's like, how do we make this thing that they've done in the game look really cool in a high budget film of that? Guide the team towards realizing the vision. So this is where the concept art thing ends. the main job of the art director isn't just to come up with the idea and to kind of pitch what it's going to look like. It's actually pushing the team to make the thing look like the concepts that you did. And that's why this is a very concept-heavy job. Like art direction, you need to have that kind of mindset because you need to be able to like, oh yeah, I think it should look like this. The director's like, it should look like that. You draw it, and it's like, okay, now we need to make that. That's kind of the workflow there. So taking a leading role in the studio and out, I don't know what that means. Being aware of every aspect of production, you need to have your eyes on everything. It's a very intense job in that way. You're watching the 3D assets, you're watching the animation, everything really. Outsourcing, if you're outsourcing, we outsource concept artists, we outsource all sorts of stuff sometimes. And if you want to be an art director, you need to be aware of how that works, or at least you need to be able to learn how that works. I didn't know any of this stuff when I started. And you need to do thousands and thousands of paint overs at all stages of production. Ah, Jesus, calm down, Paul. So the first project I worked on was Destiny 2. And one thing I really liked about Axis is I had huge anxiety about doing this job because it was just a different scale. We're talking huge budgets and huge expectation. So luckily they kind of eased me into it. And I worked kind of halfway on this project, and that was great. But the one I'm going to talk about today, with my remaining time, is the second cinematic we did for Destiny 2. And this one's my baby. This is why I want to talk about it. And I'm going to go through the whole process, apparently in 10 minutes. So prepare yourselves. This is going to be quite fast. So this is my first full project. I worked with my friend Sava, incredible director, sorry. And yeah, at this point, I should say, please don't take any photos of the next, rest of the talk, basically, because I'm showing concept work that Bungie won't necessarily want to share, okay? I know you're all desperate to take photos right now, but no. So I'm going to show the video, first of all. So cut to what the trailer actually looks like while I drink all of this water. Is it playing? It starts in black, though. So is it playing? It is.
Guardians aren't supposed to investigate their past. That's the rule. But I'm not good with rules. Not when there's this much at stake. The Clovis Bray tech in that building allowed us to colonize the system during the Golden Age. They sought to create peace for all humanity. Which is ironic, because they also built Rasputin, the single most powerful weapon in the solar system. Either way, it's all been entombed on Mars since the collapse, along with something far more terrifying.
We didn't do that bit. That's not interesting. Okay, so that was like I said, the second cinematic we worked on. So I'm going to talk through the brief that we got for this. So it's a Destiny 2 cinematic. It takes place on the polar ice caps of Mars. That's a thing you have to think about. Shows us Clovis Bray, which is a facility that's never been shown in the game before. Introduces a new character who's never been seen before, but it's been heard of in the lore. And it has cool sci-fi eyes, was I guess a note. Introduces a whole new enemy, which they hadn't even finished designing, called the Ice Thrall. Shows off what she can do, and hints of a spooky new person. So that gives you a feel for kind of the briefs that we work on. And it's important to note that when we're working on cinematics, often we're working in tandem with the dev team. The dev team might still be designing Anna Bray, for example, which in this case they were. They hadn't even finished designing her. They hadn't finished designing the Ice Thrall. They'd vaguely started designing the environment, but everything was very much, we got maybe a half-finished map and some work-in-progress assets. And that's where a thing that people often don't know about animation studios, or at least with Axis, we do a ton of concept art ourselves. And we often do concept art in tandem with the main studio, because we're filling in gaps for them, and we kind of end up working on things together, which can actually be pretty nightmarish sometimes, but sometimes it works out really well. And this was one of those projects where we had to solve a lot of stuff with them. So we got this map from them. This is an environment that they provided. They also got a concept of Anna, blah, 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 some various bits and bobs. So that's pretty much all we had to work with, honestly, when we started the project. So to give you an eye into sort of our direction process, you'll notice it's very similar to the concept process, but we're talking from like a pulled out version. You know, things I'm thinking about, like how are we even going to do an Arctic environment on a scorched planet? Mars is meant to be like fiery and scorched. How, like what does that even look like? What's the best workflow here while we're trying to figure out how we work with Bungie? What are the concept art requirements for this project? In this one, I actually ended up doing all the concept art myself because I don't know, I was feeling cocky or something. Normally, we'd have like at least two concept artists on a project, along with me or whoever the art director is. And how are we going to sell the scale of this environment? These are all kind of questions going into it. Not even thinking about like technical limitations. It's like, how do we actually do this? So my first step was to do a kind of mood concept, which is this one. I basically took the map that they provided and tried to figure out what it might look like. I did a kind of rough 3D block out, tried to figure out what the tone might be. The background there is kind of a mishmash of like a Jamie Jones concept he did for Destiny that I really like the mood for. Just trying to figure it out. And at the same time I was doing this, the director was doing a full previs of the film. And previs is basically just taking kind of block assets and moving them around to figure out the cameras. And it looked like this. So there's the mood concept, there's the kind of the previs for that. So the shots roughed out, I started to create some sort of key concepts for this. So again, if we had another concept artist, they might be brought on at this point to kind of visualize, take some of his camera angles and let's paint over them and figure out like roughly what it might do. So for me, I took their environment they gave me and threw it into Octane, did some blocky renders and then of each of the camera angles and then did paint overs. So these are the paint overs I did. So trying to figure out that tone, how does that look? What color is the ice versus the sky? It was like a constant thing here because we don't want it to be cheesy. We don't want to do the kind of teal thing, orange teal thing. But it has to be a little bit like that. So these are all concepts that I did right at the start of the project to kind of define the overall mood. And we were pretty happy with this stuff, actually. Luckily, it didn't have to go through too many rounds of feedback. So these are all things. And to give you a kind of a look into the kind of concept art flow of this, a lot of it is, it's not just creating pretty pictures, it's like figuring out, hey, what does the ice look like? How does the atmosphere work in this world? What does Mars look like? You know, grabbing images to show to the team, because the thing to remember is we're building all of this in 3D. Like our team has to create this environment in 3D using basically wizardry, because I don't understand how they do any of it, and we have to give them as much information as we can. So there's an example of like where the 3D was probably a few weeks into the project. They're terrifyingly fast. And at that point, my job as art director turns into an awful lot of this, a lot of paint overs, a lot of taking the 3D assets and drawing over them and being like, hey, this is how we sell the scale. Maybe we should try this, which is all stuff you'll be familiar with if you've worked in concept art before. It's a very similar workflow. In this case, it's very dynamic. Again, these projects take literally a few months. Like, we're not talking like a year to do a cinematic here. So, early on, we'll be going through every show. Every single time a new render will come out from the 3D guys, it's paint over that stuff, try and figure out how do we make this sing. And that's where all that concept art illustration knowledge comes from. Like, how do we make this look better? You just do all this stuff. And it's just, like I said, thousands of paint overs. Maybe the director will change the camera entirely, which happens all the time. Often these shots, you need to throw them away because we'll just do a new thing, and that's what this is. This is me like grabbing those Octane renders, grabbing a different angle, painting over that. It's really fast, it's really agile. It requires, it's a high degree of skill in terms of being calm and also the technical aspect, which is obviously just painting. If you can do good paintings, good concepts, you'll be fine. You know, sometimes the lighting would change, within one day, so you have to explore both versions of it. So a few weeks into the project, we get to, or in fact, actually quite early on in the project, we do a thing called color scripting, which, as I mentioned before, is basically outlining the overall flow of colors in the piece, and these will be used by the lighting artists to define the look of the film. I backlight every single film I ever work on, and it's always a nightmare for the lighting artists because everything gets silhouetted, but I just keep doing it. So these are examples of the color scripts I did for this. So these are just pure painting, just trying to figure out like what are the colors of the different parts of the film. When Anna gets down onto the ice shelf, like how much atmosphere is there? Because our VFX people need to figure out how to do that atmosphere. Because again, we have to build everything. You have to think about you're establishing an overall look of the thing, and you're helping define how this stuff actually is made. How do the shadows work on the ice? What color is this massive ice mound thing that got added midway through production? How cool is Anna? She's really cool. And there a little process there. A lot of it's like you'll get something like this from a quick 3D block out, and we'll do like here's some better shapes, and then a paint over to show here's what it should look like. This is like key art. And actually, I ended up painting the mat for these rocks in the final, and it looks kind of like that. Speaking of mats, the sky was a huge thing in this film. We had a matte painting artist, the marvelous Stephen Corman, who's over there somewhere, being brilliant. So my job for this was to provide sort of some concepts for just the sky, because again, we need each part needs to work. So I did this big painting of the sky. This is kind of what I was thinking, these kind of layered clouds. And then I did like a breakdown of here's how the layers could work, and I just got really way too into this sky. I even did a block 3D model of this, how the clouds could work, because I don't know, I guess this was my baby, okay? I went really over the top with this. And then other stuff like UI, like what do the eyes look like? What do the characters look like? And these ended up influencing what Bungie actually did with the finals, which is kind of cool. Lots of paint overs, lots of every single thing needs painted over. Every single frame needs to be perfect. These are really high production value pieces of art, and it's not unusual to take like a few frames of animation like in one shot where these things fly overhead, and to grab a few frames and be like, no, this is what the atmosphere is doing. There's a tangent there. We're getting rid of that. We're painting over this. This VFX is not working. Let's try and make this more, let's try and make the trails more like this. Let's take out some elements of here. Blah, 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 blah. So that's kind of what we did. So in a few months, literally this was a quite short turnaround. It went from this kind of previs to this kind of storyboard to this final image. So that's kind of where it ended up going. So to wrap up this part, I'm sorry I'm talking so fast, I had so much to get through. If you want to be an art director, there's a few things that are really important here. Communication, super important. This is a job where you have to, pitch to people. You have to be able to turn to anyone in this audience and be like, this is why Destiny 2 is the coolest thing, and this is why my vision in my head is the right way to do this. So you have to work on your confidence, you have to work on your communication. You're going to have to critique people literally all the time. You need to be comfortable critiquing people and getting critiqued as well, because that's really important too, because you're also working with clients who have the ultimate say, sometimes marketing people who have the ultimate say, and all sorts of other people. It's very much it's a very communication focused job. You need to work on your charisma skills. Be confident in your vision. Everyone freaks out about their art. I do all the time. Everyone gets imposter syndrome, but to do this job, you need to get to a point in your career where you can at least say, I think this is cool. Does this look cool? And the director goes, yeah, it looks pretty cool. And then you need to be like, right, it's cool now. We're making this thing. So you need to learn, you need to study film, study cinematography, study illustration, all the things that are going to teach you how to make an image look good, because all the job is really is it's a lot of images, and they all need to look good. So being confident in your vision is really important, I think. Be humble and willing to listen and adapt. You're working for people, and you're working with creatives. There's no dictatorship here. Your word isn't God. People need to. I think to be good at this job, you need to be able to listen to people and learn. And luckily, for most of us making the leap from normal art direction or from concept art into cinematic art direction, chances are, if you're anything like me, you actually won't really know anything. I didn't know any of this stuff. I didn't know how cameras worked in 3D. I didn't know how all that stuff worked. But you just have to be open and honest and tell people and learn from them, because that's how you get better. And that goes every stage of your career. That is the case. If you're egotistical and stubborn a few years into your career, you're probably not going to do super well, I'm afraid. Learn and absorb. New tools come out all the time. There's always new IPs, new games, new films to watch, to study. And I genuinely think, going right back to the start when I was talking about being a generalist versus a specialist, I think the deeper your tool set and your visual library are, the better the artist you are. I think people who specialize, if you really love painting rocks or just environments and that's your thing, go for it. You have to follow your heart. But I do think for if I'm hiring a concept artist and I see that they can do characters and they can do environments and they can do these beautiful mood pieces, they're inherently more valuable. And it's kind of more fun. I think it's really fun being able to try and do all that stuff. Yeah. Fundamentals. Oh boy, you need to be able to. You need to be able to kit bash and 3D bash and photo bash and all the bashing of the day, but unfortunately a lot of this job is your director walks over while you're looking at a picture and goes, but what if we do this? And then you have to draw it. So you really need to work on your fundamentals. And I'm by the way, terrible at a lot of stuff. My character work is honestly dreadful. It takes me forever to do characters. But you need to at least be able to communicate. That's the key. It's concept art, right? It's communicating ideas efficiently. And that's where the fundamentals come in. If you can't look at one of those screens, like a screen capture from the film, and instantly understand the perspective and instantly see what's wrong with it or why the composition doesn't work, you're going to struggle with this one, because that's literally the job, is critiquing frames. And you have to be a team player. I think that's the last one. You're making a product for someone else. You're working with a big team. You have to work with them, use their expertise. You will never be as good at lighting as the lead lighting artist. You'll never be as good at animating as the lead animation artist, and that's fine. That's good. Talk to them. Be nice. Done. Be nice. Oh wow. I don't even know what happened here. Okay, so I have some final thoughts. Apparently, I made this quite late last night. Everyone's path's gonna be different. That was a very, very quick example of my path going through this weird journey through animation into concept art and illustration at the time, and also directing and all this other stuff into art directing. Your path might be completely different. I would think it's really important to pay attention to what you love. Really, like if you really enjoy drawing just elves, you just want to draw elves and nothing else matters to you, just draw elves. It's fine. You know, you might end up being an art director on a very specific kind of project. Just bear in mind it might not be right for this kind of job where you also have to not draw elves sometimes. Don't worry if things don't always work out. I don't know what that was in relation to, but that's just good life advice, I guess. Sometimes you can have ups and downs. Be yourself. I've already made that point. And be nice. That's the most important thing. If you're nice, you'll get hired. If you're humble, you'll get hired. And if you are nice and humble and easy to work with, people will want to work with you, which means you'll get hired. So, yeah, thanks for listening to that was like 40 minutes straight.